Everybody in Cowboy County had a version of how she died. The sheriff had her drowned in the flood of 21. The diner crowd had her run off to Phoenix with a man whose name nobody could agree on. The Methodist ladies had her dead of grief, which is a thing they say about women they don't understand. Me, I had no version at all, because I'd stopped keeping track of people the year my wife went into the ground, and I started keeping track of cattle instead. So when Cole Anders came pounding on my door at 3 in the morning with mud to his elbows and a woman's blood drying brown across the front of his shirt, the first honest thing I felt wasn't fear. It was a kind of slow, cold understanding that the county had been wrong about her, and that being wrong about a person is a quieter sin than most, but it still leaves a body lying somewhere in the dark. I'm 71 years old. I have watched a great many things give up. Land gives up. Wells give up. Men I drank with give up between one Christmas and the next. I had begun to believe giving up was just the natural settling of the world, the way a barn leans before it falls. What I am about to tell you is the story of the year I learned I was wrong about that too. I keep a log, have done since 1979. Spiral notebooks, the cheap ones, stacked in a steamer trunk that used to hold my mother's quilts. Weather calvings, the price of feed, the day the windmill seized. My doctor says it's good for the mind to write things down at my age. My doctor is 40 and has the soft hands of a man who has never broken ice off a trough at dawn. So I take his counsel the way you take salt, sparingly, and only because the alternative is worse. I mention the log because it's how I'm able to be honest with you about the order of things. Memory lies. Memory is a coward. It rearranges the past to make you the hero, or at least the bystander. The log doesn't care about my dignity. So when I tell you what happened, I'm reading it off the page, and the page does not flatter anyone, least of all me. The first entry that matters is dated a Tuesday in late March. It says in my cramped hand, Cole's truck out past the river road again. Third time this week. Fool's going to drop an axle in that wash. That's all. 4 lines about a neighbor's truck. I had no idea I was writing the opening of anything. Cole Anders ran the spread south of mine, 400 acres of mostly rock, an attitude that his father had run before him and his father before that. He was maybe 34 that spring. Wide through the shoulders, narrow everywhere a man's supposed to be, with a face that looked like it had been left out in the weather one season too long, which it had, because Cole worked the way some men drink, like he was trying to drown something. He was raising twins alone, a boy and a girl, 6 years old, named Sam and Della. Their mother had left when they were 11 months old, not died, left, climbed into a hatchback one September morning and drove east and never sent so much as a postcard. The county had a version of that too. The county always does. I'll say this plain because Cole would never. He was a good father in the way that good fathers are mostly invisible. He didn't talk about it. He didn't ask for credit or casseroles. He just showed up every single day to a job that has no clocking out, with 2 small people who needed everything from him and could give him almost nothing back but love, which, if you've ever raised a child, you'll know is both the only currency that matters and a thing you can't pay the feed bill with. The twins rode in his truck most days. You'd see them, 2 pale heads bobbing in the cab, going to school, coming from school, going to the co-op, the 3 of them so used to each other's company that they'd developed the easy silence of an old married couple. People found it sad. I found it about the most hopeful thing in the county, but then I've always had the contrarian's eye. So when his truck started going out past the river road, out to the wash where there's nothing but tamarisk and rusted fence, and the dry bones of a creek that only runs when God's in a mood, I noticed. You notice the patterns of the people near you out here. You have to. There aren't enough of us to afford the luxury of not knowing. I found out what he'd been doing the same night the whole county did, which is to say the night he showed up at my door bleeding someone else's blood. He didn't knock so much as fall against the door. When I opened it, he near went down across my threshold, and I caught him by the front of that ruined shirt, and the first words out of him were not help or call someone or even I'm sorry. They were, "She's in the truck. She won't let me take her to town. She made me promise." I'm an old man. I sleep badly and I answer the door with a shotgun, and I had it in my offhand right then, and Cole looked at it and threw it like it was a screen door. There was a particular kind of wildness in him. Not panic. Worse than panic. The look of a man who has been carrying something too heavy for too long and has just felt the strap begin to give. "Cole," I said, "whose blood is that?" "Hers. She tore the stitches. The ones I did. I did them wrong, Earl. I did them so wrong. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to." And then he stopped, and his jaw worked, and he got control of himself the way you'd wrestle a gate shut in a high wind. "Please. I don't know who else. Everybody else already decided about her." Everybody else already decided about her. I have turned that sentence over 1,000 times since. I keep it on the inside cover of that spring's logbook, "Cop it out," because it is the truest thing anyone has ever said in my kitchen, and the man who said it had a 5th-grade education and dirt under his nails and no idea he was speaking scripture. I put the gun down, I got my boots, I followed him out to the truck. She was lying across the bench seat with a horse blanket over her and the twins' booster seats shoved up against the dash to make room, and the first thing before her face, before the blood, was the smell. Infection has a smell. Anyone who's nursed a downed animal knows it. Sweet and wrong, underneath the iron tang of fresh bleeding, and the moment it hit me I understood that whatever this was, it was old. Days old. Maybe more. Then I saw her face, and I had to put my hand on the truck bed to keep my feet. I knew her. Not well. Out here you don't know anybody well except by accident or marriage. But I knew the face, the way you know a face from the post office or the gas station, the way you know the faces that make up the wallpaper of a small life in a small place. Her name is Marisol Reyes. She taught at the elementary school a few years back, before the flood, before whatever the county decided had happened to her. Sam and Della's age, the twins would have had her, except by the time they started school she was already gone, already a ghost story, already a thing people said poor thing about and then changed the subject. She was not dead. She had, in fact, been very much alive this whole time, somewhere out past the river road, in the wash, in a place a man only finds if he goes looking 3 times in 1 week and drops an axle doing it. "How long?" I said. My voice came out wrong. "I don't know exactly." Cole was already in the cab, already getting her head up off the seat with a tenderness I will not forget, a man who handled 400-pound calves like they were nothing, cradling this woman's skull like it was made of eggshell. "I found her end of February, in the old line shack out there. She was hiding, Earl. She was hiding from somebody and she'd hurt her leg. Broke it, I think. Said it herself, said it wrong, and it went bad. And she wouldn't let me take her anywhere because the somebody she's hiding from is the kind of somebody that town has on his side." He said all this very fast and very flat, the way you report a thing you've said to yourself so many times it's worn smooth. "And you've been," I said, "bringing her food, antibiotics when I could get them. You can buy the fish kind without a prescription. Did you know that? The fish kind's the same as—" His voice cracked clean in half on the word same, and he stopped and breathed, and the breath shook all the way down. "I've been keeping her alive for a month, by myself. And tonight I lost her pulse for 10 seconds and I can't, Earl, I can't keep her alive by myself anymore. I'm out. I'm out of whatever it is you spend doing this." I have known Cole Anders his whole life. I knew his father, who was a hard man, and his grandfather, who was harder. I had never once seen any Anders ask another living soul for a thing. It's not in the blood. The blood says you carry your own water or you go thirsty, and you do it proud. He was asking me, with another woman's death 30 seconds away across the seat of his truck, with his own children asleep 2 miles south in a house with no one in it, he was asking. I climbed in. Now here is where I have to tell you about the decision, because the rules of an honest accounting require it, and because I have not forgiven myself for how long I took to make it. She was dying. Anyone could see that. The leg was the source. I got the blanket off and I saw it, and I won't describe it except to say I'd put down stock that looked better. She needed a hospital. She needed a surgeon and an IV and a sterile room and a dozen things that existed 40 miles away in a town with a perfectly good little hospital that would have taken her in without a second's hesitation. And she had made Cole promise. Made him. The word matters. A dying woman, lucid in her terror, had extracted a promise from the one man keeping her alive. No town. No hospital. No one official, no one with a record, no one who could be made to talk. Because the man she was hiding from, and I'll get to him, I'll get to who he was, though knowing it now I half wish I didn't, that man had the kind of reach that turns a hospital intake form into a death sentence. So the decision in front of me, at 3:30 in the morning, in the cab of a truck that smelled like infection and fear, was this. Keep her promise and maybe watch her die. Or break it and take her to town, and maybe save her body straight into the hands of the thing she'd nearly killed herself escaping. I want to tell you I knew right away. I didn't. I sat there with my hand on her ankle, taking a pulse that fluttered like a moth against a window, and I did the arithmetic of an old man who has buried more people than he saved, and I felt the weight of it settle on me the way I imagine it had been settling on Cole for a month. The awful private knowledge that there was no clean choice, that every road led to somebody's harm, that the only thing on offer was which harm you could live with. And Cole watched me do the arithmetic. He watched me the way the twins watched him, I'd learn later, with total, terrible faith. Like I might know. Like being old was the same as knowing. She made you promise, I said finally. She didn't make me anything. Something went across his face. Hope and horror twins themselves. If I take her to town, I went on, I'm the one who broke it, not you. You kept your word. You can look her in the eye whatever happens. It's on me. Girl. I'm 71, son. I got a lot less to lose than a man with 2 kids asleep in a house. I was already thinking it through, the logistics of it, the lie I'd tell at the intake desk, the way I'd say I found her in my wash on my land, that I'd never seen her before, that Cole Anders had nothing to do with any of it. Keep him clear. Keep him clear for the twins, who'd already lost one parent to a hatchback and could not spare the other to a county jail or a vengeful man's reach. Get her to my truck, the Ford. It's faster and it won't quit on us. You go home to your kids. You were never here. He didn't move. Cole, you were never here. And here is the part the county would never believe. The part that to this day makes the diner crowd go quiet when I tell it. The part that taught me everything I needed to know about the difference between the men who survive out here and the men who matter. He took her hand, the dying woman's hand, and he leaned down close to her ear, and in a voice I wasn't meant to hear but did, he said, I'm not leaving. I told you I wouldn't, and I'm not. Earl's gonna fix it so it's his name, but I'm not leaving you. And she, Marisol, the dead woman, the ghost story, the poor thing, opened her eyes. Just barely. Just a slit of consciousness, dragged up from wherever the body keeps its last reserves. And she said one word. I heard it. I wrote it in the log that same dawn so I'd never be able to pretend I hadn't. She said, stay. We took my Ford, all 3 of us. Cole drove because his hands were steadier than mine, and because telling an Anders to go home to safety is like telling the wind to settle. I sat in the back with her head in my lap and my coat balled under it, and I talked to her the whole 40 miles, nonsense. Weather, the price of feed, the names of the constellations my wife had taught me before she died. Because somewhere in my long useless life I'd picked up the notion that a person dying alone is the worst thing there is. And I had decided in the back of that truck that whatever else happened, Marisol Reyes was not going to be alone again. Not on my watch. Not for one more mile of her life. She held my hand the whole way. Her grip would loosen and I'd squeeze and it would tighten again. This little Morse code between a stranger and an old man. Still here, still here, still here. And the dark went by outside and Cole drove like the devil was behind us, which in a sense he was. About 10 miles out she started talking, fevered mostly, names that meant nothing to me then and everything to me later, a street in a town she'd lived in before, a sister, and once clear as a bell, sitting straight up in the panic of it before I eased her back down, she said, "He'll know. The minute they write my name down, he'll know and he'll come and you've got children." And Cole said, not turning around, in the flat, dead calm voice of a man who has already made his peace with a thing, "Let him come." I have thought a great deal about those 3 words, about the math of them. Cole Anders had spent his whole life avoiding need, avoiding risk, avoiding anything that might take him away from those 2 children for even an afternoon. And here he was, driving 40 miles an hour over the limit toward a hospital that might ruin him, telling a man with reach and rage and reason to come on ahead. Let him come. I asked him later, much later, when it was all over and we could talk about it the way you talk about a storm you've survived, I asked him why. Why her? Why this woman the whole county had written off, when he had every excuse in the world to drive on past the wash and keep his own small, fragile life intact? He thought about it a long time. Cole always thought about things a long time, and then he said, "Della asked me once why her mama left, and I didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie or a thing I couldn't put on a 6-year-old. So I just told her, sometimes people get given up on, and it's not because they deserve it, it's because giving up is easier than the alternative, and the only thing you can do about it is decide you're not going to be the easy kind of person." He looked at his hands. "And then I went and found a woman everybody'd given up on, living in a shack on my own land, and I thought, well, I guess I better mean what I told my kid." That's the whole story in a way. The rest is just what happened next. But that's the heart of it, right there, in the front seat of my Ford at 4 in the morning. A man who had nothing to spare, spending it anyway, because he'd made a promise to a little girl about the kind of person he was going to be. We hit the edge of town as the sky went gray. The hospital sign came up out of the dark, lit and humming, ordinary as anything. I tightened my grip on her hand one more time. She tightened back. Still here. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, sitting in that truck with the engine ticking and the doors not yet open, was that the man she was running from had a name I'd seen in the county paper not 3 weeks before, under a photograph, shaking hands and smiling. And that by the time the sun was full up, he'd know exactly where she was. The surgeon who took her leg was a tired woman named Akafer who'd done 2 tours in places she wouldn't name. And when she came out to find me in the waiting room at 7:30 that morning, she sat down beside me without asking, which is how I knew it was bad before she said a word. "She'll live," Akafer said. "We got the leg below the knee. Any longer and we'd have lost her to the sepsis. Whoever was treating her." And here she gave me a long, careful look, the look of a professional deciding how much trouble to make kept her alive longer than I'd have bet on. Bad antibiotics, no equipment, no training. By every reasonable measure she should have died 3 weeks ago. Somebody refused to let her. Somebody, I agreed. She didn't push. Tired people in caring professions develop a sixth sense for which questions cost more than the answers are worth. She's going to need a long recovery, and she's going to need someone, Mr. Earl, was it? She came in with no ID, no next of kin, nothing. She'll wake up in a strange room missing a leg, and the first face she sees is going to set the tone for whether she fights or quits. So, she stood, joints cracking. "Don't be a stranger. I want to be honest about the cowardice in me, because I promised you an honest accounting, and the page in the log from that morning does not flatter me." When Akafer walked off, my first clear thought was I could leave. I'd done the thing. I'd broken the promise so Cole wouldn't have to, gotten her to where the medicine was, kept my hands clean of the part that mattered most, the part where you stay. I could drive home to my cattle and my quiet and let the hospital and the state and the social workers do whatever they do with a woman who came in off an old man's mercy. Nobody would blame me. 71 years old, a widower. What did I owe a stranger? I sat in that plastic chair for 40 minutes arguing with myself, and I'm not proud of how close I came to winning. What kept me there in the end wasn't nobility. It was Cole. Cole, who'd gone home at my insistence to get the twins off to school like the world hadn't cracked open, and who'd called me twice already not to ask about himself, not once about whether his name was clear, but only, is she alive? Is she alive? Tell me when she wakes up. A man with everything to lose, frightened only of losing a woman he'd known for a month. And I thought, if he can do that, you old coward, you can sit in a chair. So I stayed. She woke up a little after noon. I was reading a hunting magazine from 2019 and not retaining one word of it when I heard the bed creak and looked up, and she was watching me. Lucid. The fever broken. Her eyes, I'd only ever seen them fevered or half shut, were a dark, steady brown, and they took in the room, the IV, the flat place under the blanket where her leg ended, and then they came to rest on me, and I watched her do the arithmetic I'd done in the truck. Where am I? Who knows? How much danger? "You're not Cole," she said. Her voice was a ruin, but the words were clear. "No, ma'am." "Then who?" "Earl Maddox. I run the spread north of his. He came to me when he couldn't keep you going on his own." I set the magazine down. "I'm the one took you to town against your promise to him. He kept his word. I broke it for him. So if you've got anger about being here, you point it at me and you leave that boy out of it. He near killed himself keeping you alive in that shack." I'd rehearsed none of it. It came out the way the truest things do, all at once, in the wrong order, true anyway. She was quiet a long time. Outside the door a cart rattled past. A monitor beeped its small electronic patients. Then she started to cry, and it was the worst crying I've ever heard, because it had no sound to it. Just water, running silent down a face that had clearly learned, somewhere sometime, that making noise when you hurt is a thing that gets you found. "He'll know now," she whispered. "You wrote my name down, they have to. For the insurance, they write it down, and he checks. He has people who check." She turned her face to the wall. "You should have let me die in the shack, at least then it would have just been me. Now it's you and Cole," and her breath hitched. "He has children, my God, he told me about them, the twins. He has children and I let him." "You didn't let him do anything," I said. "I've known Cole Anders 30 years, and there's not a power on this earth could have made him leave you out there once he'd found you. That's not on you. That's just who the man is." "Then I have to leave." She was already trying to sit up, already pulling at the IV, this woman who'd been on a surgeon's table 4 hours ago, and I had to stand and put my hand on her shoulder, gently, the way you settle a spooked horse. "I have to get gone before he comes. If I'm gone, they have no reason to. You've got one leg and a hole in your hip where the infection went, and you can't stand up without help. Where in God's name do you think you're going?" And she looked at me, and the fight went out of her all at once, the way it does when a body finally runs out of the thing that's been keeping it upright past all reason. And she said the second sentence I copied into my log that I've never been able to shake. "I don't know. I never had a plan past Don't Die. Don't Die was the whole plan. I've been running Don't Die for 2 years, and I never once let myself think about what came after, because thinking about after felt like a thing I hadn't earned. 2 years of Don't Die, and the county had her shacked up in Phoenix with a man whose name they couldn't agree on. Now I have to tell you who he was, the man in the newspaper, because you've waited long enough and because the not knowing is a cruelty I won't extend. His name was Garrett Voss, and 3 weeks before any of this, I'd seen his photograph on the front page of the Cowboy County Courier, under a headline about a land deal and a ribbon cutting, shaking hands with the mayor and the head of the water board. He'd bought up the old Castellano ranch and a few thousand acres besides, and was fixing to put in some kind of development. And the paper called him a visionary and a job creator, and ran a flattering picture of him in a hat he had no business wearing, a town hat, a hat for being photographed in. Marisol had been his housekeeper. Then she'd been more than that, the way it sometimes goes, the way the powerful arrange the world so the people who clean their houses owe them their lives. and then she'd seen something. She'd tell me the whole of it eventually, but not that day. That day she only gave me the shape of it. She'd seen something to do with money and a man who'd gone missing and a stretch of the river that wasn't supposed to be touched. And Garrett Voss had explained to her, calmly, over breakfast, what happens to people who see things. So she ran. And she'd been running, more or less, for 2 years. The broken leg in the shack, just the latest in a long line of places Don't Die had washed her up. And now her name was on a hospital intake form 40 miles from the ranch he'd just bought. And Garrett Voss had people who checked. I knew the man a little. Everyone did by then. He'd come to the cattlemen's dinner that winter and bought a round and laughed too loud and looked at the room the way a coyote looks at a chicken coop, doing the math of it. I disliked him on instinct and then felt bad about disliking a man on instinct, because that's the kind of fool I am. I don't feel bad about it anymore. He came to the hospital on the 3rd day. Not himself. Of course not himself. A man like Voss doesn't show up to do the thing. He sends a man in a good shirt to ask polite questions and let the answers do the threatening. This one was named, well, his name doesn't matter, and I won't give it the dignity of the page. He came in the afternoon while I was getting coffee, and Marisol was alone, and the first I knew of it was coming back down the hall and seeing him through the door, sitting in my chair, in my plastic chair, leaning toward her bed with his good shirt and his patient smile. And the look on her face was a look I'd only seen once before, on a heifer in a chute who knows where the chute goes. I'm 71. I'm not a brave man. I have spent my whole life avoiding rooms with trouble in them. But there's a thing that happens to you. I learned that afternoon, when you've sat with a person through the worst hours of their life. You stop being able to tell the difference between their trouble and your own. Her fear had become my fear somewhere around mile 30 of that drive. So I did not feel brave when I walked into that room. I felt like I was protecting something of mine. Visiting hours are family only, I said. He turned, took me in, filed me under old, harmless, rural. We're old friends, Marisol and I, aren't we? He didn't look at her when he said it. He didn't need to. Funny, she never mentioned you. I came around the bed slow and put myself between his chair and her, the way you'd put yourself between a snake and a child, no sudden moves. And I've been here 3 days straight, heard a lot of names. Yours wasn't one. His smile didn't move, but something behind it recalculated. And you are. The man who found her on my land, brought her in. Here was the lie I'd built, and I told it the way you tell a true thing, looking him dead in the eye. Never seen her before in my life. Just couldn't leave a person to die in a wash. You understand, Christian thing. On your land, a beat. Where exactly? Now why, I said, would I tell a man who isn't family the exact spot I found his old friend dying alone, with a leg she'd set herself, hiding in a lined shack like she was scared half to death of something? I let that sit. You'd almost think she was running from somebody. You wouldn't know anything about that, old friend like you. That landed. I watched it land. The good shirt shifted in the plastic chair. She's confused, he said. Standing, she's been through an ordeal. People say all kinds of things when they're confused. I'd hate for an old man to repeat confused things to the wrong people and get himself tangled up in a misunderstanding. At his age, living alone, I'd imagine, way out there. He set a card on the bedside table, face up, his name embossed in gold. When she's lucid, she'll want to call. We have a great deal to discuss, Marisol and I. He left. The good shirt walked out of the room and down the hall and out of the building, and I stood there with my heart going like a trapped bird and Marisol behind me making that silent crying again. And I understood fully, finally, the way you understand the weather's turned by the smell before the cloud, that I had just made an enemy of a man who could end me, and that I did not regret it, and that not regretting it was the most alive I'd felt since my wife died. I picked up the gold card, I tore it in half, then in half again. I dropped the pieces in the trash. He's right about one thing, I said, not turning around, because she needed a second to put her face back together and I owed her the privacy. We do have a great deal to discuss, just not with him. That night I called Cole and told him everything. The good shirt, the threat, the name Voss, the visionary, the man from the front page. There was a long silence on the line, long enough I checked it hadn't dropped. Then Cole said very quietly, "Della's got to play this Friday, school thing, she's a tree. She's been practicing her one line for 2 weeks." A pause. "If I do this, if I help you protect her, there's a road where I don't get to see my daughter be a tree on Friday. You understand what I'm asking? Is it worth it? Her against my kids Friday." And I want you to understand that this was not Cole being cold. This was Cole being the most loving man I've ever known, laying the cost out on the table in plain sight, refusing to pretend a hard thing was easy, doing the arithmetic out loud because he'd be damned if he'd hide from his own children the price of the kind of man he decided to be. "I'm not going to tell you it's worth it," I said. "That's not mine to say. I'll tell you what I know. I know she's been running Don't Die for 2 years, and you're the first person who ever ran toward her instead of away. And I know a man like Voss, he doesn't stop at her. He threatened me tonight. The kind of man who threatens a 71-year-old in a hospital room, that man already knows your name, Cole. He knows you've got a spread and 2 kids and a soft spot, and he will use every bit of that against you whether you help or not. So the only question isn't whether it costs you. It already costs you. The question is whether you pay it standing up or sitting down." The silence again, shorter this time. "Della's gonna be a real good tree," he said. "She's gonna be the best tree that school's ever seen, even if it's a video her brother takes on my phone." A breath. Okay, Earl, tell me what you need." He didn't see his daughter be a tree on Friday. What he did instead, what the 3 of us did, an old widower and a single father and a one-legged woman who'd run out of Don't Die and had to learn fast the harder thing, which is live, is the rest of the story. But that's the night it turned. That's the night the rescue stopped being a thing that had already happened in the cab of a truck and became a thing we had to keep choosing, over and over, against a man with money and reach, and a good shirt to send. Marisol slept that night for the first time without the fever, and I sat in the plastic chair and watched the door, an old fool with a phone full of a single father's instructions, and a heart full of something I hadn't felt in 11 years. Around 2 in the morning she woke and saw me there, awake, watching the door. "You're still here," she said. "Told you," I said. "Nobody's dying alone on my watch, and nobody's running alone either. Not anymore." She looked at me for a long moment in the dark, and then she said the third thing I wrote in my log, the thing that's on the last page of that Springs book, the thing I read sometimes when the nights get long. "I forgot people could be like this. I thought I'd made it up. I thought like this was a thing I'd invented to keep myself running, and it turns out it was real the whole time, and it was 40 miles away, and it found me in a wash." Then she went back to sleep, and I watched the door until the sun came up. The thing about a man like Garrett Voss is that he is patient right up until the moment he isn't, and the moment he isn't comes faster than you'd think, because patience for a man like that is a performance, and performances cost more the longer you hold them. He waited 11 days. In those 11 days, a great deal happened that the county never saw, because the most important things that happen out here never happen where the county can see them. Marisol healed enough to leave the hospital. She could not go home. She had no home. Don't Die doesn't leave time to keep a home. And she could not go anywhere with her name on it. So she went to the one place Voss would never think to look for a woman he'd terrorized. The spare room of the single father whose children she was terrified of endangering. I argued against it. I want that on the record. I said it was too dangerous, said she should come to mine. An old man alone draws less notice than a man with kids. Cole heard me out, the way he heard everybody out, fully and without interrupting, and then he said, "Della and Sam know about her now. I told them. Sat them down and told them there's a woman who got hurt real bad and got scared real bad and she needs a place to be safe while she gets strong, and that we're going to be that place because that's what our family does. He paused. And you know what Della said? She said, like how you came and got us from the bad day with Mama, 6 years old. She remembers a thing from when she was 11 months old. She's made up a memory of it, of me coming and getting them, and she's filed it under what our family does. His voice did the thing it did, the crack and the recovery. I'm not going to teach my kids we protect people only when it's safe. That's not protecting. That's shopping. So she went to Kohl's. And for 11 days there was something out there on that hard 400 acres that I can only call a family, though no court would have recognized it and no church would have blessed it. A single father, his twins, a one-legged woman learning to stand again, and an old neighbor who found more and more reasons to drive south for coffee. I watched her come back to life in those 11 days. It's the closest I've ever come to watching a resurrection. The first morning she flinched at the screen door slamming and spent an hour with her back to a wall where she could see all the exits. By the 11th, she was sitting at the kitchen table teaching Sam his multiplication tables with the patience of the schoolteacher she'd been before Don't Die ate her whole life. And when the screen door slammed, she didn't even look up. Della took to her like the desert takes to rain. The girl had no memory of a mother, and had clearly been carrying a mother-shaped hole around for 6 years without knowing what to call it. And here was this woman who knew how to braid hair and do funny voices when she read aloud, and who treated Della's one line in the play she'd missed. I am the tree that gives the shade, like it was Shakespeare. Made her perform it a dozen times, cried real tears at it, told her she was the finest tree in the history of the American theater. Cole watched that from the doorway one evening and had to go outside for a while, and I followed him out, and we stood in the dark not talking, the way men do, and after a long time he said, I didn't rescue her, Earl. That's what everybody's going to say if this gets out, single father saves the girl, hero, whatever. But that's not what happened. He looked back at the lit window, at the woman and his daughter inside it. I was drowning too, different water, but drowning. 2 kids and a dead marriage and 400 acres of debt, and not one single soul on this earth who needed me to be anything but tired. And I found somebody who needed me to be the man I'd told Della I was going to be, and being needed like that, he shook his head. She rescued me right back. We just don't have a word for that. The hero word only goes one direction. I wrote that down too. The hero word only goes one direction. There's a lot of truth out here that the county doesn't have words for. Voss came on the 11th night. Not the good shirt, himself. Which is how I knew the patience had run out. A man like that only does his own dirty work when the performance has stopped paying, and the thing underneath the performance gets hungry. I was there. That's the part I still can't fully account for to myself, that I happened to be there, that I'd stayed late, that some old animal instinct had kept me from driving home. The log just says bad feeling, stayed past dark. I've learned not to argue with bad feelings. They've kept me alive longer than my doctor with the soft hands ever will. He came up the road with his headlights off. We saw them anyway. You can't hide a vehicle on that road. The dust gives you away under a half moon, and Cole had the twins in the back bedroom and Marisol with them before the truck had stopped, and he and I were on the porch when Voss got out, and he wasn't sending a message this time. He had a thing in his hand, and it wasn't a gold card. I won't write the next part the way it happened second by second, because some of it I've made my peace with and some of it I haven't, and the parts I haven't aren't mine to put on a page for strangers. I'll tell you the shape of it. I'll tell you that Garrett Voss, visionary, job creator, the man from the front page in the hat he had no business wearing, stood in the dirt yard of a single father's ranch and explained, in the calm voice of a man who'd done this before, exactly what was going to happen and to whom, the children included, unless Marisol came out and got in the truck and made the whole misunderstanding go away. I'll tell you that Cole Anders, who'd spent his whole life avoiding rooms with trouble in them, stepped off that porch and put himself between Voss and the door and said, "There's 2 kids in that house and they're not part of whatever this is. You want her, she's not yours to want. You want to go through me, I'm right here. But the kids walk away from tonight no matter what. That's the only thing I'm not negotiating." I'll tell you, a man can be very brave and very outmatched at the same time, and that those 2 things together are about the most heartbreaking sight there is. And I'll tell you what saved us, which was not me, and was not Cole, and was not any kind of justice arriving the way it does in stories. It was Marisol. She came out, on her crutches on her one leg, down the porch steps. Cole had built a ramp beside that afternoon without being asked, and she came out into that yard, and Voss smiled because he thought he'd won, and she said, "You came yourself. You didn't leave me a choice, Marisol, you." No, her voice was steady, steadier than I'd ever heard it. "You don't understand, you came yourself. You drove out here to this address, after dark." And she lifted her free hand, and in it was a phone, Cole's phone, and on its screen, I'd learn, was a recording that had started the moment the headlights showed, and a text already typed and waiting to send to a number she'd been holding for 2 years, a number belonging to a journalist in Phoenix who'd been trying to nail Garrett Voss to the wall about a missing man and a stretch of river since before Marisol ever ran. I spent 2 years too scared to use what I saw because using it meant he'd find me, and you just drove 40 miles in the dark to find me anyway, so there's no reason left to be scared, is there? The thing I was protecting myself from by staying quiet, you just did it. You found me, so now I get to be loud. And she pressed send. I'd like to tell you it ended clean. It didn't. Nothing out here ends clean. Voss didn't go to prison that night or that month. Men like him have lawyers the way the rest of us have, whether constant, expensive, and capable of delaying any reckoning indefinitely. The recording and the testimony and the things Marisol had seen made a long, slow grind of a case that's grinding still, the last I heard, the way the river grinds the rock, which is to say without hurry and without mercy, and without any guarantee of the outcome a person would want. But he never came back to that ranch. The thing that protected the twins in the end wasn't a verdict. It was light. Marisol pointed a light at a man who only worked in the dark, and men like that scatter from light the way roaches do, not because they're beaten but because the cost-benefit changed, and a man like Voss is nothing underneath the performance but a creature doing sums. It's not a satisfying kind of safety. I'll be honest about that. There's no day we can point to and say that's the day it ended. Marisol still sits where she can see the exit sometimes. Cole still drives the river road slower than he needs to, checking. The county still doesn't know the half of it, and the diner crowd still has their versions, and Garrett Voss is still in the paper now and then, smiling, because the case grinds slow. What I have instead of a satisfying ending is this. It's October now. 7 months since the night at my door. Sunday dinners happen at Cole's, and I'm always there, and so is Marisol, who has a prosthetic now that she walks on better than I walk on my 2 original legs, and who has gone back to teaching, not at the school, not yet. The case makes that complicated, but she tutors a half-dozen kids out of Cole's front room, including Sam, who still can't do his multiplication tables and adores her past all reason. Della asked me last Sunday, in the way children ask the questions that flatten you, "Earl, are you my grandpa?" And I didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie or a thing too big to put on a 7-year-old, so I borrowed Cole's old trick. I told her the truth sideways. I said, "I'm the man who's going to be there. That's the part that matters. The names don't matter near as much as people pretend." She thought about that with her whole serious little face. Then she nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing, and I had to go out to the porch for a while, the way Cole does, the way men do. Marisol followed me out. She's gotten good at knowing when somebody needs the dark and the quiet and a person who won't make them talk. She just stood next to me at the rail, the 2 of us looking out at the wash where Cole found her, dry now, holding nothing but tamarisk and the last red light of the day. After a while she said, "Do you ever think about how close it came? How many ways it doesn't happen? He drives past the wash. You don't answer the door. I die in the shack the way the county already had me dead." "Every day," I said. "Old men think about that more than anything. All the close calls. All the ways the people we love almost weren't there to be loved." She was quiet. Then, "I keep waiting to feel rescued. That's the word everybody uses. The rescued woman, and I don't feel rescued, Earl. I feel she searched for it. I feel kept. Like the river kept me. Like I went down into the worst of it, and instead of carrying me away, it set me down on a bank I didn't know was there, and there were people on it, and they'd been waiting, except they didn't know they were waiting until I washed up." I didn't say anything. Some things you don't improve by answering. Inside, Cole was getting the kids to wash up for supper, his voice carrying through the screen door, ordinary and warm and tired, the voice of a man doing the invisible work that good fathers do, the work nobody puts on a front page. Della was arguing that her hands were already clean. Sam was claiming, falsely, to have set the table. Marisol turned to go in. At the door she stopped, the way she does, framed in the light the way she'd been that first night at the hospital when I couldn't tell if she'd fight or quit. She fought. She's still fighting. The case grinds on and the fear comes back some nights and the leg aches when the weather turns, and she fights, every single day, the harder fight that comes after Don't Die, the fight to believe she's allowed to stay. "You coming in, Earl," she said. "There's enough. There's always enough now." And I stood out there on the porch a moment longer, an old man who'd buried a wife and a great many years and most of his expectations of the world, looking at a lit window full of people the county had given up on or never noticed at all. And I thought about the log in the steamer trunk, all those spiral notebooks full of weather and cattle, and the slow settling of the world toward giving up. I thought I might need a new notebook, one for the other thing, the thing that doesn't settle, the thing that drives out past the river road 3 times in 1 week and drops an axle and keeps going anyway.